Hey everybody, it's Ted. Welcome to the Ted Show. Today is Tuesday, December 19th. Oh, I've got the glare on me too. So you guys are going to tell me that I probably need to get out of the sun. I'm not going to mess with the lighting right now. Let us know that you can hear us and see us. Scott Thompson, I see you on there. Wouldn't it be nice if you were in here helping me with the camera? I've got my guest, Ed Souza. Is that how we say it, right?
Ed Souza. Some people say Ed Souza.
I get Ted Bogart all the time. Welcome, by the way. Thank you so much. So we reconnected after a long time. Give them a little bit of information or background while I make sure everybody can hear us. Oh, you can see us, Tony. Yay. Hey, Lena. Let us know you can hear us too. Make sure it's not too scratchy. I'm really excited about this topic, so I want to make sure you guys can hear it because I'm a big conspiracy theory person, especially now that he's got some real facts to back it up. But anything JFK I'm fascinated with, and I think there's a lot of people who are also fascinated with it. So I think they can hear us and see us. So welcome.
Thank you.
So give us a little bit of background on you, because I met you being, hey Deidre, thank you, loud and clear. Thank you, Tricia. You and I met through real estate.
That's correct.
I was, in a past life, I was an insurance agent, and you were a realtor.
I was.
With KW, right?
That's correct.
See, Lee, I told you, people are going to respond to this. Hey, Jerry. Then when the crash happened, because that's how long we've known each other, we both went in different directions. I think I kept my insurance agency because that was a little more recession-proof than being a realtor was. But then you went back and went off into another direction. So tell them what you did.
Yeah, I did. I've been a licensed investigator in Florida for quite a long time now. My previous life, I was an LAPD officer, and after doing that and moving to Florida, I went ahead and got my private investigating license. So yes, I was doing real estate and fairly successful at it.
You were very successful.
I know, it's tough. That still bothers me.
Do you miss it? Yeah, but nobody could survive 2008, right? Isn't that?
It was very tough.
Anybody who talks about it, we all have PTSD, seriously, from it. It's very, very scary.
Yes, it's very true. And when I ran into Ray Lopez yesterday, good friend of mine.
Love Ray Lopez.
You know, he's doing great and moving, getting new businesses open, and so and Jenny Weimer, of course, is a close friend of mine.
I love Jenny. I'm going to move this, guys. I'm getting comments, and that's okay. You keep talking.
So, anyways, I wish I could have stayed in it, but so I fell back on my private investigating. I went to grad school, and I'm just now completing my PhD. I'll be defending pretty soon, and I became a professor after that as well. So I was doing both for a while. And I decided that my wife has pushed me for many years to write a book on John F. Kennedy's assassination. Mark Furman was actually a partner of mine.
Like Mark Furman from?
Mark Furman from LAPD, right.
Wow.
Yeah, and he wrote a book back in '06, and it was called A Simple Act of Murder. And Mark and I used to talk assassinations all the time. Robert F. Kennedy was murdered in Los Angeles back in '68. So there was a big topic for him and I. We worked patrol together, and we would talk. And he always believed there was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy and Robert as well.
But just to clarify, the Mark Furman from the OJ.
Mark Furman from OJ.
So you were we do no R&D here, so I don't know enough. I know enough to be dangerous. You were a patrol.
At the time, I worked patrol in LAPD with Mark Furman. Correct. So we became friendly, and but that book that he wrote in '06, although it disputed the single bullet theory, it did not go far enough. So my wife told me, Ed, you need to write a book. And I said, well, I don't want to go at my friend on this topic, so I stayed away from it. And but once I went to grad school and became even better at research, and certainly at the PhD level, that's all we did was research. So I felt stronger that I could produce a good product, and so I came up with Undeniable Truths, which was published in 2014.
Where did you get the passion for the JFK assassination? Where did that come from?
That came from my father, actually. My dad was a huge JFK fan, and he loved JFK, and he always knew, although my dad didn't have a PhD and he wasn't an investigator on a police department, but he was very smart, and he knew that Kennedy was killed in a conspiracy, without a doubt. So I started reading books when I was really little, 9, 10, 11 years old. And he had a pile of stuff even then that I studied. He had a book called Rush to Judgment, which was written in 1966 by Mark Lane, who became one of my mentors, actually. He just recently passed last year, I believe. He was a wonderful person, and he supported my book and endorsed it in 2014. So I started to read these topics. I was getting better at reading. You know, I liked the pictures back then, but
I'm still not good at reading. That's a whole nother topic for somebody to help me with.
And so I got more information, and I started realizing. And then my dad was, he was a military veteran, fought in the war, and he had PTSD actually too, but they didn't identify it back then. So he wasn't into guns anymore. He didn't do anything with guns, but my Uncle Joe was. He was a hunter, an NRA, a target shooter, and so he told my dad, Bill, let me take Ed out and teach him how to shoot. You know, I think every young man needs to know how to shoot. So he did. He took me out to the ranges where he was the range master and taught me how to shoot. Well, what I learned on was a bolt-action rifle. That was the first gun I ever shot. And a bolt-action rifle, if you don't know, has a bolt on it, and you push the bullet in and lock it, and then you fire. Every time you fire, you have to pull the bolt up, kick that shell out, and put in another round. So it takes a little bit of time. I also fired semi-autos.
Is that what?
Which are much quicker.
What was the gun? Is that
Oswald?
Yes.
The Oswald rifle was a bolt-action rifle.
Okay, so I was like, I know. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in because I'm fascinated. So did that background with your uncle and your dad? That's what began to inspire you.
The connections.
The connections.
The connections were being made.
But when did you really feel like? When were you old enough, or when did it really go? Okay, I've identified these things, and none of this makes sense. Which I think there are very few people, especially in this day and age, that accept the one bullet, one assassin.
True.
Or 2 bullets, 1 assassin, I guess.
3 shots, 1.
At all, and although that's what we were spoon-fed back in when the Warren Commission came out. See, I know enough to be dangerous. But I don't think anybody can really say that they 100% believe that it was just Oswald.
There are those that do, and they came out.
That's fascinating.
They came out against my book a couple times, but all the it has really good high ratings. So when they would come in and try to maybe not do it in quite the nice way, other people would attack them, so they kind of all went away after a while. But
so take us through that.
In the beginning, I was getting some disputes because there are some people who still believe that Oswald was the single and sole assassin of John F. Kennedy.
Thanks, my friend. We got lots of good comments. So let's talk because I want to have enough time for the meat.
Absolutely.
And we'll hear about you later, and I'm sorry that I'm cutting him off. I'm going to get yelled at for this later.
Do it.
But there's so much to cover. So one of the most fascinating things for me to look at is this Zapruder tape. I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Zapruder, right?
Zapruder.
Mm-hmm.
But so how do you go? Take us through that day. So tell us a little bit about the facts, the theory. I don't know how we say this without offending anybody, and I'm not worried about them. I just don't want to offend the author here. How do we talk about that? Because we're told that he was up in the book
6th
floor.
Right.
I mean, we all know the facts, but in your book, do you take them through how that couldn't possibly have happened? Tell us some of the theories or the facts that you have that don't support what the Warren Commission came out.
Perfect. That's a perfect setup. Basically, where I'm at is in the book. I wrote the book like a police officer, like a detective. Nobody had ever done that before. Nobody had ever written a book, and basically unraveling the crime scene. When the FBI investigated the assassination of Kennedy, they did so while being controlled by J. Edgar Hoover, by being controlled by Lyndon Johnson. They did not investigate anything. They pretty much did what they were told to do by Hoover and Johnson. So no real police officer ever really investigated this crime. Dallas police, they deferred back to the FBI. They started to go down some good roads and were cut off. So it wasn't that they were all dysfunctional. They were just not allowed to investigate. As an example, one of the officers that you see in the Zapruder film gets off his motorcycle and runs up the grassy knoll with his gun drawn. When he jumped the fence, he encountered a man who had Secret Service badge, and he said, "It's okay up here, I'm Secret Service." And the officer immediately, with everything going on, disregarded this man and moved on. Well, there were no Secret Service agents up there. As a matter of fact, we now know who that person was based on other people's research. And he was not a Secret Service agent. He was a CIA agent. So this officer wanted to investigate this further. He wanted to know, hey, wait a minute, if this guy wasn't Secret Service, who was he? He was told to knock it off and forget it. So they tried to investigate, but there was nowhere for them to go. So where we're looking at is, what I did was I took it apart. I took all the witnesses, just like if in LA when I investigated a homicide. I would get to the scene, secure the scene, make sure the scene was secure, which this wasn't. A lot of evidence was destroyed. Witnesses were either not taken seriously, information was changed once they submitted it, their testimony was changed, their statements were changed. It was just not an official investigation of any quality. In the book, I go through this all, and even the people that disputed my multiple shooter theory agreed that 2/3 of the book is excellent. It's written like a police investigator would write a book on, what happened, no matter whose murder it was. The Zapruder film is a very powerful piece of evidence that we have. It doesn't show us everything, but it definitely gives us a timeline of what happened with the shots.
That's exactly, because without it, we wouldn't have had the real timeline.
It's very difficult. There were other videos. You might not know about other videos, but there were 7 videos taken. That was clearly the best one, but Orville Nix took another video as well, and when the FBI got a hold of his video, they dismantled it, and when he got it back, it was changed.
So is your theory, because you said it or you mentioned it earlier, your theory is there were multiple shooters.
Absolutely.
But your theory also is expanded that it was was it a giant conspiracy, like a whole bunch of organizations involved? Or tell them a little bit about what your theory is so that they can ask questions.
I'm going to get to that in 1 second. Okay. What I want to show you, a UP Press photographer took this picture.
And we'll post it.
I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but this is a video, picture that was taken just after the first couple shots went off. In this video, you can see that John F. Kennedy, it may be difficult for you to see, has been struck in the throat already. He's already grabbing his throat. You can see his hand. You can see his wife's hand is on his hand. And if you look in front of him, you'll see Governor Conley has not been shot. He's totally looks fine. He's not suffered any injury at that point. And why this is so important is for several reasons.
So let me see.
Yes, sir.
As you're talking.
So if Conley isn't struck at that time, then the bullet that hit Kennedy in the throat could not have hit Conley. So what you have is about 2 seconds before Conley is hit, Kennedy is struck. So this destroys the single bullet theory. It destroys the lone assassin theory, because now you have more than 3 shots at this point. If you look at Governor Conley, who is totally inactive at that point, he hasn't been struck. Within another second of that picture, he's struck, and I believe he was struck twice. Also, Kennedy could not have been hit from behind. I studied the autopsy, and this is what's kind of crazy, is the Warren Commission has some truth in there. You have to dig for it, though. You've got to go through all these volumes. You have to look at the autopsy, and the autopsy does not lie. It shows that Kennedy was never struck from behind in the back of the neck. It never happened.
Was that the official thing, that he was struck from behind?
The official version of the Warren Commission, see, the Warren Commission had some truth in it, but it's their conclusion that they misled the public on. And Alan Dulles said to Gerald Ford and other members that, don't worry about this, because the American people don't read. They're not going to read the Warren Commission. It's several volumes. So they doctored the conclusion. But in the Warren Commission, you'll see, if you look at the autopsy, Kennedy, the only wound to his back was down in the lower area of his back. And that bullet I'll get to in a second.
Oh, but I don't know that. Hi, D, by the way.
Yeah, and then never penetrated. Then nothing ever came through the back of his neck. So where did that shot come from? If it didn't come from behind, there's only another place it came from, and that's in front. And we actually know that a bullet penetrated the windshield. So that shot came from the grassy knoll, high up on the knoll, went through the windshield and hit him in the throat. That was probably the second shot. The first shot missed the car completely. So Kennedy's grasping at his throat now. The next shot that comes in hits Conley. And it may have been a second shot that hit Conley. That bullet that penetrated Kennedy's back also, the trajectory does not line up with the 6th floor. It lines up for Conley, but not for Kennedy. That bullet was way too low in his back. And it's my determination that that bullet came from the Daltex building, which was directly behind the president. That bullet did not hit any bone. It actually, the autopsy medical examiner said it went in about 2 inches and never penetrated. So what does that tell you? The bullet never even came through his body. So it could never have hit Conley anyways, even the lower shot. But they couldn't find the bullet. In the autopsy, they were digging around. They found the hole, but no bullet. Well, there were 2 FBI agents there, and God rest their souls. They were excellent at what they did. They did a 6 or 7 page report on the autopsy. It's detailed, graphically, within millimeters. They took down everything that was said and heard and what they saw, and they created this report that still stands today. But like they said, most people don't read. And we didn't have access to that report for many years.
Right.
So reading that report, which is now available, you can see that they were perplexed on where this bullet was. What happened to this bullet? So they paused. And Siebert, one of the agents, went to the phone and called the FBI headquarters and talked to the firearms unit and said, hey, we have a hole in Kennedy's back, definitely a bullet wound, but we don't have a bullet. And just at that time, that firearms expert said, well, I think I have your bullet. It was found on John Kennedy's stretcher. It was given to the Secret Service who delivered it to us. And we have it, and I'm examining it now. And I believe we're going to find that that's your bullet. So that is the so-called magic bullet that everybody talks about that was supposedly found on Conley's stretcher. In reality, it was found on Kennedy's stretcher.
So the back, though, I'm fascinated. So I always thought, again, no R&D, and you think you know what you know and you don't. I thought all of the shots were here and up, like the head and the brain and the neck. I actually don't have knowledge of the shot that was in the lower back.
Right.
That's fascinating. Yeah, how do you get that from everything else in the trajectory? Okay, sorry. I want to clarify that to make sure I'm getting it.
It's correct. It is correct. Kennedy was hit 3 times. He was hit in the throat once. He was hit in the back, that lower back, and that bullet that never penetrated. And he was hit in the side of the temple, which exploded out the back of his head. Now, some experts, colleagues, believe that he was also struck in the back of the head at the same time that the bullet hit him in the temple. And that's possible. But because the back of the head was completely destroyed, there's no way to know if he was hit in the back of the head at the same time.
Right.
So at least 3 confirmed hits on him.
Wow.
That shot that hit him in the lower back is interesting because I made a determination that it possibly hit his back strap. One of the reasons Kennedy did not move in that car is he had a girdle, pretty much. He had a harness around him. And when he was hit in the throat, he leaned forward, but that's as far as he could go. He could not go any further because he was being held up by this harness.
That's because he suffered from many years of back injuries
right.
and serving in the war and all of that.
So, it was horrible.
But they didn't talk about that stuff back then. They didn't announce every little tiny detail about the president and everybody in public office back then.
It's bad, yeah.
So people didn't know.
No.
So nobody had any idea, so that would make sense. So if he's got this, if you've ever had a giant back brace or spine brace or anything on, you literally can't move.
Right. You can't.
So that's fascinating. I did not know that.
And I think that it either hit that back brace and bounced out onto the stretcher when they were moving him around, when they took him from the car, put him on the stretcher, eventually that bullet came out. And now, the actual version that the Warren Commission came up with was the 3-bullet scenario to make it look like one person did this crime. They took that bullet and said, oh, well, this is the bullet that went through Kennedy's neck from behind, hit Conley, caused 3 wounds to Conley, shattered the radius bone on his wrist, and ended up in his thigh. So years ago, people like Dr. Cyril Weck, who is another mentor of mine, incredible human being. I'm actually dedicating my second book to him. I dedicated my first book to Mark Lane. Dr. Cyril Weck for years argued that a pristine bullet like that could never have made all those wounds. You could not have a bullet that came through somebody's neck, slammed into somebody's back, broke 3 ribs, punctured a lung, went through the radius bone of a 6'4" man, and then end up in his thigh and come out in perfect shape. Well, the reason that bullet is in perfect shape is because all it did was go into Kennedy's back 2 inches, possibly stopped by the back brace, and there really is no destruction to the tip of the bullet. That is my magic bullet theory, actually. So what we have here now is we have a shooter in front. We obviously have evidence of this. You can see that picture. Conley was not struck by that bullet. That bullet never entered Kennedy's rear of his neck. So you have a shooter in front of the car now, at least one. Now you also have another gunman behind, because the trajectory of that bullet that hit him in the back is way too low. I've been to the scene of the shooting multiple times. The very first time I went was a long time ago, and you can actually get in the window. You can actually sit. They let you get right into that window. What I noticed about it was that there's too much foliage. Even for back then, if you look at the pictures, look at the trees in this picture right here. You could not have shot through those trees. No way. It wouldn't happen. So the car would have had to been much further up before you got that first shot off. And the back wound certainly you could not have maneuvered it, not from the 6th floor. So now you have a second shooter behind. And then who hit Conley? That was another shooter. That bolt-action rifle did not give a person enough time to cycle around and refocus to fire. So now you probably have a second shooter in the book depository building. I personally don't believe Oswald was even in the window. I think he was down in the lunchroom like he said he was. He was seen there by multiple people. He was seen there by a police officer less than 90 seconds after the shooting. He encountered Oswald with his gun drawn and had Oswald where he said, hey, what's going on? And the manager said somebody shot the president, and he asked him if this person is an employee, and the manager said, yes, he works here, and they moved on. And Oswald stood there with the Coke in his hand.
But why? So I guess so it all goes back to me, for me. Mm-hmm. Why? What was, so you've got, your theory is that you have 3 shooters, right?
I would say
2 or
definitely
3.
At least 3 shooters, right?
So, but why? Why was there the need? Obviously somebody felt a very strong need, and it was a very coordinated, organized effort. Mm-hmm. Why was he assassinated? What was the reason? What were they afraid of? What were they hiding? Give us some of that, because I think people don't get it. And who does when an assassinate? I mean, that changed, and I want us to have time a little bit because we're already getting there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Talk about that, and then I want to talk about the impact that you felt like that has had on us, because we talked a little bit about that.
We did talk about that.
So give me a little bit of background as to the who and why.
Okay, sure. Well, the who and why is a little harder to prove. Okay, as a professor, I teach criminal justice, forensics, crime scenes. I know a lot about evidence, physical evidence, crime scenes, and that stuff is easier for me to prove, which I just showed you. We've been lied to multiple times that clearly what they said happened never happened. But the theory about who did it, that is a little tougher to go with. Like Cyril Weck and I talked not too long ago together about it. He has his theories, but it's just a theory. That more than likely it was a government CIA type operation. We know some evidence. E. Howard Hunt, who is of Watergate fame, the great spy, before he died, he confessed to his son on audio and video that he was there that day, that he helped orchestrate the murder of John Kennedy, and that Lyndon Johnson and Hoover covered it up. There are other people, Frank Sturgis, who was another Watergate burglar. He liked to drink, and he opened his mouth a few times saying he was there in Dallas, and that he later denied this before he died, but other witnesses had heard him say it. There is another lady, Lorenz. She was part of the CIA. She claimed she was there with them driving to Dallas in 3 cars, heading to Dallas with weapons in the trunk. She didn't know what they were doing at the time, and when she figured it out, she said that she fled. She went back to Miami and didn't want any part of this. And she said E. Howard Hunt was there. He was passing out money and maps of Dealey Plaza. Well, Kennedy was not a favorite of the CIA. He was not a favorite of many people. We remember John Kennedy as being some of us anyways, a great president. He had his problems. Obviously, we know some of the women issues he had and other things which Ted said were not talked about then. So he wasn't a perfect person. I'm sure his confessional lasted quite a long time. But he was a real American. He wanted America to be free. And he told William O. Douglas, while he was in office, that he believed that the CIA was running the country, that a group of individuals was controlling America, and that he did not think that he could overpower them. He felt that they were going to get him in the long run, but he was going to do what he needed to do to prevent this. And so he pretty much told the CIA that I'm going to dismantle you once I get to my next term, which is in '64. And he was going to dismantle the CIA and reconstruct it. Because the CIA was established as an information gathering organization. It was not made for assassins. It was not made for assassinations. It wasn't made for any of that. It was made to give information to the FBI and the president. Well, it became an assassination squad. It became what we all know it to be, even to this day, which is much different than what was intended. Kennedy wanted to end that. So there's your motive for the CIA. They knew it was going to go away. He also fired Allen Dulles and Charles Cabell, who ran the CIA after the Bay of Pigs scandal broke. He fired both of them. These were sacred cows. These were people who, along with Prescott Bush, George Bush's grandfather, created the CIA. The Dulles brothers created the CIA along with that little group of individuals, and they were mad. I'd use another word, but it's not proper. They were very mad at what occurred by these people being fired. There's so much information I could give you.
So tell us about the impact, because that's, I think that's a great point. There's so much, and we're going to give you all of Ed's contact information and how to get to the book, and we'll take a picture of the book and some of the photos and direct you to his Facebook page, Twitter, all of that. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that struck me just before we went on, you were saying, I want to talk about the impact that JFK's assassination had on the country, because it was, they called it Camelot. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a very utopian, beautiful, or at least appeared to be society at that time. And when people think back to 61 to 63, they definitely look at the country a little different than they did post 63. Everything really did change.
It did change.
And I don't know if it was just because of that, which you have a theory which I want you to share.
Sure.
But we got into Vietnam. We began to, the 60s became very tumultuous. And I believe you. I think the impact's felt today. So give us your idea of your theory.
Yeah, there's so much information. It's hard to get it in a short period of time.
I know. I know you're trying.
There's, like I said, in the book I cover pretty much every detail. But, okay, so what happened? JFK is murdered. Within 2 days after his death, Lyndon Johnson pretty much goes to war in Vietnam. Not literally till the Gulf of Tonkin incident, but pretty much. He rescinded Kennedy's edict that we were pulling all of our troops out of Vietnam by the end of '64. Johnson put them all back in. He reversed it. And by the way, I found out something. You know all this stuff that's being released? A lot of stuff coming out. What's interesting is that Johnson signed that 2 days before Kennedy died.
That's amazing.
So go figure that one.
Wow.
It was signed on November 20th, I believe. Don't hold me to that. 20 or 21st. Prior to Kennedy's
Is that
death.
because of the documentation release?
It's possible.
The JFK thing.
I can't remember where I saw it recently, but I did. So, but that brought all the troops, even more troops, into Vietnam. So now you have Vietnam at its fullest, right? Another thing you might not know is Kennedy was getting rid of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve. A lot of people don't know this, but we don't print our own money. It goes to we print it, but it goes to the Federal Reserve. It's got the stamp on it. Kennedy had $4 billion in silverbacks printed. He wanted to get away from the Federal Reserve because they control our monetary and they're also involved in politics. So he was making a lot of enemies. Certainly the CIA was an enemy of his. The Pentagon didn't like him, even though he was a military man prior to his presidency. The getting rid of the Federal Reserve was incredible. Nobody had ever done that. So Kennedy was trying to free the country, pretty much. And I was telling Ted not to get into politics, which I won't. And but Donald Trump refers to the deep state. Well, the deep state is who killed Kennedy. The deep state. That's a term that he came up with, I believe. But in reality, if you look at it, he's an outsider. Kennedy was an outsider. He wasn't liked by his political cronies. He was liked by a small group of people in politics. But other than that, they did not want to pass anything through Congress. They gave him a hard time, even with the Civil Rights Bill. Can you believe that? Yes, indeed. They refused to pass any of his stuff. They roadblocked him. So he never really got to implement a lot of what he wanted.
So how did his assassination, you were talking about, impact, and then we'll wrap it up?
Sure. It impacted a country because, for one, we went to Vietnam, and that changed the course of history. Look at civil rights today. Does anybody think civil rights is okay today? I mean, it's crazy, right? We got people fighting, all kinds of issues, a lot of infighting going on. This would have all been solved had Kennedy not died, for the most part. I think we would have seen a lot more freedom, a lot more minority freedom in this country. We would have seen better education. Our inner cities would have been much better taken care of. Robert Kennedy was a big part of that as well. By eliminating Kennedy, what you got was the Vietnam War and a bunch of debt, and it rolled on. And I'll give you a little tidbit about Watergate. A lot of people don't realize there's a connection between the murder of Kennedy and Watergate. For sure, there's a direct connection between the two of them, and I talk about that in my book as well. I can't go into it here, but so you had Watergate, the distrust of government setting in. It just rolled right on with all the things that happened in history. That changed the course of, American history. It changed it forever by killing Kennedy. Kennedy was an outsider. Ronald Reagan was actually kind of an outsider his first term. He tried to change a lot of things too, and it's no coincidence that he was almost killed his first year in office. So you have a lot of change that took place because of John Kennedy's murder. And I personally, like I say in my book, I don't think we've ever been the same. I don't think we will ever be the same, because you can't just take somebody out like that and expect us to be functioning normal even 50 years later. This is why we need to be careful with our politics in our country. We need to be careful. We need to own our politics. We need to own our country and not allow the deep state and other people to control and manipulate our country. And this is what a lot of theorists believe is the main reason Kennedy was killed.
People are going to, I hope I'm going to Google deep state, because that's awesome.
That's a fresh term, so
I like
using
that,
it.
though.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so we're going to give all of Ed's contact information, take some photos of what we have here, because I know it's a little hard to see on the screen. We're in a very well lit, which is surprising to me, room right now, so you can't see some of the things I can see, but I could talk about this listen to you talk about it for hours.
I could talk forever.
But we want to put up your book. We want to definitely send them to that. And thank you for suggesting this, because we're kind of new at this on the TED Show, we're kind of new at a topic, a singular topic. Bitcoin was very successful, and obviously from the response you guys have given me and the questions you have, which Ed will go back through and answer later. There's definitely a huge interest. I think even though I was born, believe it or not, after the assassination, you still know about it, you still feel it, and you can listen to people talk about it and how impactful it was to our country. So thank you for sharing all of that. Thank you guys for being engaging. I'm going to give you Ed's contact information afterward when I post, and then you can reach out to him with your questions. You can get his book. You can go to his Facebook page, and we'll give you all of that. So thank you for coming on.
Welcome.
Again, I love this topic. Love you guys. We
Happy
will see
holidays,
you tomorrow.
everyone.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, of course, and we will talk to you tomorrow. So now you get to see me hit the finish button. Me and all my glory. Thanks, guys.